All right, so nose to tail eating. Y'all can kind of read that top part, but basically we talked about that already at the beginning, the omnivore aspect of human health and how important it is to eat some animals. And often when you're first starting with nose to tail eating, you're not quite ready to eat liver or kidney. You'll get there, pickled tongue. Maybe you won't ever get there. But bone broth is a great starting point when you're trying to eat nose to tail. And it has a lot of nutrients for supporting your detox pathways, which is what makes it so lovely and what makes really vegetarianism actually a slippery slope for detox, because most of the well, actually I think everything for the second phase of your liver is amino acid fed, and amino acids come from animal-based protein. So proteins are the amino acid aspect. So, and I'm obsessed with liver health, and my own current obsession years ago is gut health. I kind of got the hang of that. Now I'm obsessed with the liver and hepatic functions and excretory functions, and understanding how to support that for a client and myself so that they can heal their skin, heal allergies, heal asthma. I mean, once you start to clear out the detox pathways, all those symptoms of being clogged go away. And bone broth is one of the loveliest supplements you can take every day to make sure the detox pathways are fully open from phase 1 of your liver detox pathway to phase 2. A lot of people, I mean, phase 1 is pretty easy to feed because it's a lot of phytonutrients, vegetables, fruit, bioflavonoids, etc., antioxidants. But phase 2, a lot of people get hung up and nothing ever makes it to phase 2 because phase 2 is fed by amino acids and people don't eat nose to tail. And very few people take an amino acid supplement every day. And what happens if those toxins don't make it through the second phase, like the pre-wash versus the wash cycle, is then they get recirculated back into the body at a magnitude level, because it's like enhanced to prep for detoxification. So then you're recirculating hormone metabolites, toxins, biotoxins, environmental toxins, whatever the liver's trying to clear. If it doesn't make it through and it gets stuck, it gets recirculated, and the liver says, well, let me try to clear this out somewhere else. And so the liver tries to clear through the skin, and that's why you see eczema or hives or these weird skin things, or acne. Acne is a symptom of an impaired liver. Or the kidneys. The liver's like, let me try to do the kidneys. And that's why you see a lot of like UTIs and kidney stones. That would be a symptom, still a hepatically related symptom. So I try to get everybody on some bone broth to just make sure their second phase is really, really well fed. There's a lot of other benefits to bone broth, but for me that seems to be like super important, and a chronic issue that I've seen in clinical practice are impaired livers and congestion in the detox pathways. And that's a really slippery slope in the modern world that's full of toxins that we can't control. Your food touches plastic, you're breathing in car exhaust, you're getting Roundup residue in your food, you're getting things put in your body that you don't know what they are. So we need to make sure hepatic functions are ultra supported in this modern world, liver, and that our gut can support the liver's need to get toxins excreted out through stool. That's the sweet spot. Like, that's the liver prefers to detox through the digestive tract and not through the kidneys and skin. And in functional medicine, for those note takers, we call it the drainage funnel. And so we start at the bottom. We don't go to the cellular level, which is the top. We don't try to heal a cell without first trying to heal the gut, heal the liver, heal the lymphatic, open up the lymphatic system, organs, tissue, then cells. If you skip anything in that process, then you're not going to heal your cells. And so I was like, how do I talk about this but pick one thing? Bone broth. I'll talk about bone broth. And that's just a great way to start honoring the animal and learning more about. It'll be a segue into trying other things with that animal and maybe even trying some organs. So I just put the nutrient gold mine and some bullets here so you could kind of understand all the amino acids, collagen, glycine. I won't get into that too much. I put a link to the article that is just, I'm Chris Kresser trained, so most of the time I just link stuff to his content because I'm allowed to use it. And it's also really great articles. And then I gave you a recipe that's my like lazy version. I'm even lazier than this recipe, and I don't do the vegetable part. I just put bones and some ACV and some water, and I turn that baby on low, and I just let it simmer in a 10-quart crock pot next to my stove. And have you ever heard of continuous brew kombucha? I do continuous brew bone broth. So I cook so much with it every day for a family of 6 that I just like scoop it into whatever I'm making. We do a lot of broth bowls and this, that, and the other. So I just like, and then I top off my crock, and then eventually I'm like, oh, those bones are pretty hollowed out. It's time to change out the water, start a new continuous brew. I very rarely bottle it up or jar it up. That's just me personally. But you can jar it up if you'd like. So
I store it in quarts in my freezer. So I just make a big batch. What I'll do is I'll buy, meat, and I'll save the bones, or if I get a whole chicken, I'll, roast the chicken, I'll save the bones. I'll do chicken broth too, because I don't like to waste.
Yeah, I mean, you still make the broth, yeah.
Yeah, but whatever broth, it freezes well, and you use it in it's not just soups. We use it when we make quinoa. I love quinoa. Quinoa, millet, black rice are common things that we do in our house. And anytime we're making that thing, instead of water, use bone broth. Use bone broth.
It lasts about, with Polyface specifically, I don't know how it works with other bones, because their bones are cut in pretty big, good chunky pieces. And I do 2 bones for a 10-quart crock. It's about 3 days. So it's about, 72 hour, probably sometimes 96 depending. But I just look at the bone, and once it's hollowed out, I'm like, oh, those are done. Glass, yeah. Or Pyrex glass freezes well.
Okay.
Your quartz don't crack?
So I do not freeze in glass because I don't have enough. But what I'll do is I will cool the broth and make sure it's room temperature before I store it in the plastic quarts.
Okay.
That's true. That would be.
That's just a more practical. If I had enough glass, I would use it, but it's just not practical in my house. But definitely make sure that you let the bone broth cool to room temperature before putting it in plastic and freezing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's general rule of thumb with anything plastic. Is anything hot touching plastic, the plastic will leach. With any beverage or any liquid or any food.
Yeah. And then when you're ready to use it to thaw it, I just leave it out on the counter for the day if I know I'm going to use it that night. That way it just pours out, usually still in like an ice chunk form, but it'll melt in the pot at that point. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the cartilage.
The cartilage, yeah. It's all that gelatin.
I'm like getting grossed out saying that myself. And
They're in there by the way.
it's very visually
Throw them in
intense.
your broth. They're amazing.
Yeah, I have chickens too, and they're my pets. So I like every time I see chicken feet and I put it in, I'm like, ooh, a little triggered by it. I still do it. They do not have the same nutrient profile. Beef is nutritionally superior to chicken. However, you should still make chicken broth if you have a chicken so that you don't waste.
Yeah.
And it still makes a nice glycine. I mean, there's still there's still a lot actually of amino acids in it. It's just going to not have as much collagen and like the benefits of the bone marrow. So beef probably has closer to the 17 amino acids that are on the sheet, and chicken probably has closer to like 5. So it's a big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Like when I do make a lot of chicken stock, chicken broth, because we do a lot of like whole chickens in the house. But you're not gonna see that nice gelatinous layer on a chicken broth, chicken bone broth. You're just not gonna see it. So.
Well, and that's a good point to the store-bought. They strain the good stuff out, even the good brands. And like if it comes out that thick or that thin, they've taken out the bone marrow layer, because most people that hard layer that gets hard in the fridge, they've taken that out because still the world of consumption is still not okay with that showing up in a product on the shelf, unless you're buying broth from a farmer's market or somebody who's making it.
It's
So.
like, yeah, that reminds me of going back to the raw milk. It reminds me of, we homogenize raw milk for that reason too, because people don't like to see that cream separated from the rest of the milk. But unfortunately, when you homogenize, you actually alter the fat particles. So the body, it kind of doesn't know what to do with those fat molecules anymore. So it's kind of the same. Like, as consumers,
Shake it.
it's not something that we're used to seeing. So to see that like fat layer on top of broth is probably similarly maybe a turnoff for a lot of people. Like, they would see that the cream layer separated from the milk. So
I get a lot of clients texting or emailing me their very first bone broth and like, what is this? What is this stuff in it? Like, am I supposed to drink that? I'm like, yes, you are. I mean, it's just we're not used to that experience. We once were. Another good example is in your garden, the holes in your kale and the holes in your arugula, etc. That is making that lettuce or that leafy green nutritionally superior, because once there's a pest, then it boosts up its defenses, and micronutrients boost by like 5-10x. We're not really sure. We're just now starting to study that. And so if only the farmer's market, I can't take to I own an organic grocery store in Virginia Beach. It's just called the Farm Life Organic Market, very generic name. I can't take, just last night, one of my farmhands was like, the arugula has holes in it, what do I do? I'm like, I can't even take that to the market and sell it in an organic market where most people are very much into that. They will not buy it. But that is making it jam-packed with nutrients, because it's boosting its defenses to survive from the pest. So if you see holes in your lettuce, just soak those caterpillars out, drown them, and eat it. Or sometimes I eat a slug. I don't know. I didn't mean to. I just was like, oh, a snail. Well, shoot it up. May as well swallow it. The kids too. They just eat the bugs. They don't know any different. I'm not going to tell them, don't eat that bug, because I think it's good for you. So that's another kind of food medicine tip of like what we're programmed to see and interpret our world, the matrix, right? Like what we think we're supposed to do versus what innately we should do, or just intuitively. So.
Going back to nose to tail, I was going to give you a tip that I use in my house. If you're liver curious, but you're not really prepared to like fry it up and prepare it, we buy good quality livers from our farm. I'm sure Polyface has
the best liver ever.
Here. But I freeze it, and then I chop it into little chunks, and they're like liver pills. So if you can chop them into little chunks, and then I keep them in a container in the freezer, and then you can like pop them and you can chew them, and they're frozen, so you don't really like get the full flavor profile, which for many of us is like a good thing. So I appreciate that I can like pop a frozen liver pill, chew it enough where I can get it down. But my children love them. So again, going back to what Ashley was saying, when you start your children from a young age eating this way, my daughter, I gave a couple to the dogs because we feed our dogs human food as well, but I gave a couple liver chunks to the dogs. I popped a couple, chew it just enough to swash it down. But then my 6-year-old, Mommy, can I have some too? And I'm like, please, baby, go right ahead. Like,
eat the liver.
And she just pops them like it's a treat. I don't think they taste that good, but no, it is raw.
It's raw.
Raw liver. Yeah, it's one of the most nutrient-dense foods. If you can get it into your diet, it's one of the best things you can do. Speaking of nose-to-tail eating. Now, my 3-year-old wasn't exposed so much at a young age to the liver, so I'd give her some, and she's like, Mommy, this doesn't taste good. I'm like, it's okay.
What are you eating?
But, it's a testament if you start your children out young enough, but you probably know. So it's a wonderful gift you can give, like Ashley was saying before.
Do you have any essential oils or herbs in your broths?
No, you could. I mean, rosemary. I mean, as we were saying earlier, you could definitely, parsley, thyme, any of those vitality oils, some black pepper. I said vitality of Young Living, but whatever oils. I would probably think that wouldn't hurt. Yeah. I'm just lazy. I'm not lazy. I have 4 kids, so I'm just like, but I think that sounds like a good idea that everybody should do.
Oh yeah, I'll add herbs just for flavor profile, but not really for any particular benefit.
But I do ingest a lot of essential oils, personally. It's just like supplements. I like them, so that's a good tip. Anything else about nose to tail? You don't have to eat raw liver. You can cook it and still get the micronutrients. It doesn't have to be raw. It's just, nutritionally a bit more dense raw.
If you're eating it raw, do you limit yourself to like 1 bite a day, or do you like?
So they say like 3 to 4 ounces a week is sufficient for liver. So you could just estimate, a couple, maybe 1 or 2 every day or every couple of days. Yeah.
And do you freeze it for like a certain period of time, or just as long as it's frozen?
No, as long as it's frozen, that's if you're worried about pathogens. I mean, the freezing 14 days should kill any pathogens. But like when you're buying really good quality liver, it shouldn't be a concern. Do not do this with store-bought liver. Let me just disclaimer. Only do this with if you know where your liver is coming from. I would never eat raw liver from the grocery store. No.
But yeah, the 14-day is the freezing duration for pathogenic, to kill pathogens. And that's a good idea when you're first getting started too. Over time, the microbiome becomes, really resilient, and like once you shift over to ancestral nutrition, you'll never get a foodborne illness again, most likely, and you'll start to, handle all that stuff differently. But initially, it's good to kind of be cautious.
So I actually do. I let it sit out just a little bit, but I actually cut the plastic wrapping off, and I have like a big butcher knife. And I mean, it takes a little bit of muscle, but I try to cut it while it's still frozen because it gets like, liver is kind of like slimy and gross when it thaws out. So, and then the problem if you let it, because I've done this is from personal experience, if you let it thaw out too much, and then you put it all back in the container, back in the freezer, it all freezes together as one big clump. So now you don't have frozen liver chunks anymore. You have you just have another big frozen liver. It's because it all just freezes back together. So try to cut it while it's still frozen. That way you just keep all the frozen chunks and put it back in the freezer.
And I actually cook mine. I don't do the raw. And then I cut it. I actually eat liver, but before I started eating just liver and hiding it in soups and things with the kids, I made it into little capsules, cooked, and then would tray freeze those. So they were like little liver, because if you buy liver capsules, I mean, there's certainly a lot of them on the market. They're expensive and you need a lot of them. So if you just cut them into little I just cut them into little tiny cubes, tray freeze them, and then I'll pop a few that way.
Yeah, so desiccated liver you can buy easily, Amazon. There's some brands that I like, but you have to take a ton of them to get like the amount that's recommended. So that's the one downside. Like if you're not going to do any liver, any whole liver at all, if you're not going to do the frozen liver pills or cook it, I think it's better than nothing. But I would say like the desiccated liver pills that you can buy is probably like a second. That would be like your plan B if you're not just if you can't get any like actual liver in your diet. Yeah.
Is chicken liver?
Yeah, chicken liver is great. Yeah, they have a little bit of different, so chicken liver actually has more iron than beef liver. And then beef liver has a little bit more B12 and folate than chicken. So, but they're very close nutritionally. Yeah. Chicken liver does taste better than beef liver. There's a couple gaps without the beef liver, but nothing crazy. So for even, I don't know if anybody's heard of methylation issues or MTHFR, is any of that? Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, MTHFR, those gene mutations that we're seeing in COMT. Liver is like one of the best food medicines to add into the diet to not need to take B12 and folate forever. I'm a methylation nightmare, and I don't take anything. I just eat nose to tail. My oldest son also is on the spectrum, and that's what got me into all this, and he doesn't take anything either. And we both are homozygous for the A and the C. And we have a hetero on the COMT, one that causes like sociopathic tendencies. So that's me. No, I'm kidding. But that's actually what started it for me. I think I'm kind of obsessed with food medicine because like where I would be personally would be a completely different place because my genetic wiring is wired for a mental health disaster. And sadly, like my mother's clinically bipolar and high medicated and really struggled for a lifetime, and her mother died in a psychiatric hospital. And so like I'm very mindful of mental health and how to support my brain that can't quite process things the way other people's brains can. And that's, why I'm willing to eat liver. Highly motivated.